presence. It's the second to the last day, Lord, of our workshop. And I'm sure there are still questions, Lord, in some hearts that they are not even aware of. But we ask, Lord, that whatever it is that we have need of, to have understanding of, even as we go out, Lord, to teach these principles, we ask that you make it real to us. We ask that you bring it to the surface and that you will answer it. We thank you, Lord, for all the speakers today. We ask, Lord, for your grace upon them, that they will minister, Lord, as oracles of God, that they will teach, Lord, as men and women sent, Lord, before you, from you. We thank you for our participation and the small group discussions. We ask, Lord, that the connections will go well. We ask, oh Lord, that we'll have fruitful time, Lord, and that we'll leave this place edified, that we'll leave, Lord, from this meeting with tools, Lord, with skills to go and do the things that you have asked us to do. We ask all this, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
All right, thank you. So today, as Emmeline has said, is the day where we will be finishing sessions 11 and 12. Session 11 is management, and Dr. Walker will be taking us through a portion of that, and I will be taking us through a portion of that. Session 12 is quite a short session, because normally we ask that you have speakers who come in, and we'll talk more about that when we get to session 12. And then tomorrow, we want to go over some of the training, more about training, and our desire in terms of how we behave as trainers together. And then you will also be able to take your exam. So tomorrow will not be a full session. It'll be about a half of a session. And then the exam will be available. So we'll talk more about that at the end of today's call. I'll go through some of the things that you can be thinking about for the exam. But let me start now with a devotion, and just reminding us that our goal in each session is to help people to see and understand the Word of God as it relates to business as mission, as it relates to doing our work as an act of worship. And so in this session, again, we have quite a few components, but we want to look at management, at personnel, at time management, at inventory management, and general operations. And our goal and our desire is to see us to grow to be managers of God's business. God is the owner and we are the managers. And there are so many components to doing that, that it takes us a little bit to get through that. We want to start today with a devotion from Matthew 22, verses 34 to 40. And could I ask someone to read this for me?
The greatest commandment, hearing that Jesus has silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.
All right, thank you so much, Bosi. We look at this as the greatest commandment, right? And in Discipling Marketplace Leaders, we talk about that there are three great directives. There's the Great Commitment from Genesis 1. There is the Great Commandment from Matthew 22, and then the Great Commission. And the Great Commandment we talk about as the social bottom line, is that we are to love our neighbor. And as trainers, one of the things we want to emphasize throughout the training is our neighbor is the person in our place of work. Who is our neighbor at work that God is asking to love? Whether it's a competitor, whether it's a customer, whether it's an employee, whether it's a vendor, who is God calling us to love? The attention that we want to look at in this particular text is the question of love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the question that we want to ask is this: why doesn't Jesus say, love your neighbor as I do? Why doesn't Jesus ask the question, love your neighbor as I do? It's interesting that it says, love your neighbor as yourself. But we are not perfect in how we love ourselves. You know, that it's just, he could have said, love your neighbor as I love your neighbor. But he doesn't say that. I'm muting. If we can mute our microphones, please. When we come on, when we look at this, we want to acknowledge that the reality is I don't know how Jesus loves my neighbor, but I do know how I love myself. I don't know how Jesus is loving Grace. I don't know how Jesus is loving Yvonne. I don't know how Jesus is loving Isaiah, but I do know how to love myself. And there are three things that I am often committed to in loving myself. I'm committed to my own provision. I'm committed to my own protection, and I'm committed to my own pleasure. Those are three things that we are committed to when we are loving ourselves. So my provision means that I am committed to making sure that I have to making sure that I have food. If I didn't have food, if I didn't have shelter, which is protection, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would be out looking for food. I would be out looking to figure out how to have protection and shelter. Those are things that I am committed to for myself. I'm also committed to pleasure, which means having friends, having people who love me, having the opportunity to have fun. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, provision is the bottom one, food and water, and then safety is the next one, the protection that we have, that we need in order to be able to flourish. Pleasure comes above that, love and belonging, being able to have people who accept us. And so Jesus is saying, love your neighbor as you love yourself. As much as you are committed to your own provision, protection, and pleasure, also desire that for your neighbor. Now, for trainers, how do we bring this to business people, especially as it relates to customers, to employees, and to others in our business? And one of the things that we want to think through, a lot of us, when we start a business, we are doing it to meet a need, right? There's a need in the community, there's an opportunity for us to meet that need, and that's what we want to do. And then it doesn't take long for us to forget a little bit about that need, and we become focused on the profit. We become focused on ourselves, because that is what human nature does. We want to make sure that we are getting our provision, our protection, and our pleasure. And this text is calling us to say, as much as you want that for yourself, you need to want that for others as well. And in this case, my customer. How do I make sure that what I am serving my customer is the quality that they need, is the value that they deserve to get for the money, that it will serve them as we are promising that it will serve them. And we looked at that for customer satisfaction, right? In session 10, Caroline took us through that, to the importance of meeting your customer's needs. Without a customer, you don't have a business. But the one that we often forget is our employees. And so we said that the purpose for business from God's perspective is twofold. It's to help our customer flourish, and it's also to help our employee flourish. Not everyone is gifted to run a business. There are many people who are doing business because they like the thing that they're doing, but they don't actually have those managerial or leadership skills. They'd much rather just do, like, to be a tailor than to do the marketing and the bookkeeping and the managing of personnel. That takes a different type of person to do that. But what we want to say is that as employees, one of our purposes is to help for business, is to help our employees to flourish. And too often, my experience has been is that we are doing business and employees become a cost of labor. We don't really want to let our employees know too much about the business. We just want them to do what they are to do, but we don't think about how can they flourish? What is God's calling for them? How do I love my employee as I love myself? How am I committed to their provision, to their protection, to their pleasure? And so we talk about the wages that we pay. How do you make a decision when you're committed to your own provision, protection, and pleasure? Your children have a need to go to university. You have a need for your parents and for your extended family. And yet you also have this employee that also has needs. How do you make some of those difficult decisions? And so we want to say in this text that loving your neighbor as yourself means that you need to think through how you love yourself and your commitment to yourself as well as your loved ones, and how that then reflects on your neighbor, whether it's your customer, whether it's your employees, whether it's your vendors, your competitors, and so on. And that is the calling that Jesus is giving us in the greatest commandment. Remember that it's easy to love people that are easy to love, that are within your sphere, your circle of friends and family. The more difficult one is to love those who are outside. And when we remember that our purpose for doing business is to help the customer flourish as well as the employee flourish, then it helps to keep that perspective there so that we can know how to love our neighbor. We are committed for our provision, for our protection, and our pleasure. And Jesus knew that. He knew that we know how to love ourselves. Now, many of us don't do that well, and some of us are, end up becoming desperate in a way that we do self-harm. But for the majority of us, we are committed to these things at a minimum for ourselves, and we want to raise that discussion. And so in this time, in this session, we're going to be looking at what does it mean to be a servant leader? What does it mean to be committed for the provision, the protection, and the pleasure of others in our business? What is God's calling in terms of our social bottom line? And so, Father, we do ask that you help us, that you open our eyes, both as individuals who may be running a business or have employees, Father, but also as individuals who will be training others. Father, give us eyes to see the reality of how we treat ourselves and how we extend grace and favor to ourselves, and that we can also do that for those who come in contact with our businesses, that they may flourish. Our desire, Father, is that your business, you are the owner, we are the managers, and that we manage in this business in a way that reflects you, that we may love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and help us to come to understand that our neighbor is our customer, our neighbor are our employees, our neighbors are our competitors, and help us to know how to love them in a way that allows for flourishing on many different angles. Thank you for your word, Father, and for calling us to this. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So today we are looking at...
Hi, Renita.
Go ahead,
Please,
Emily.
before you go on, can you make me host?
I'm going to be doing the groups. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, you've done it already.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you. As we look at this picture again, remember that this picture is at the beginning of every PowerPoint that we do, every session. And the point is to remind people of where we are in the structure. Especially when we start the course, the first 4 weeks, we're working on the foundation. And some business people are like, I need to know how to make more money. When are you going to get to the part of making more money? And so this visual reminds them that there's a structure that's being built, and we need to pay attention to the foundation. That's critical. We've put in the doors and the windows. We've put on the roof, and now we're coming back. Session 11 and 12 is when we are applying the paint. We are making the place beautiful. We're putting on our finishing touches. So we are back to the walls in the finishing touches in session 11 and 12. Our objectives for this session, for session 11, is to help people understand the difference between being a boss and a leader. Many people like to go into business for themselves because they don't like to be bossed around. They want to be their own boss. But as a business grows, you end up becoming the boss of somebody else. And so how do we do unto others as we want it done to ourselves? So understanding the difference between those two, and to understand the need to do business in such a way that the employee can flourish, which when the employee flourishes, as we saw in customer satisfaction, the business will flourish as well, because remember, 67% or so of customers leave a business because of the treatment of one of the employees. And so when we help an employee to flourish and understand that they have a calling at this time in that business, that they can flourish, it will have an impact on the business itself. Second objective is to understand the importance of risk management and how that relates to helping our business, to manage our business so that it can flourish. Time management is critical in a business. Inventory management. Not all of us have an inventory if we have a service business, but knowing how to manage that as well. All of those things enter into management to help our business flourish. And then the last objective is to get a deeper understanding of the quadruple bottom line and the need for leadership by management towards sustainability for creation to flourish and for the business to flourish. So the last thing we'll look at is sustainability and our environmental bottom line and some of the management decisions that we make, reflecting again the owner as it relates to the environment. So with that, I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Walker. There are some questions that we will take some time to go through. And this slide right here is one that we often want to start session 11 with a dialogue. And I don't think we'll be doing that today, but just asking people about how many employees do they have and get a sense of who you have in the room. How many of you had to close your shop in order to come to the class? How did that make you feel? Those who have employees that they trust, they feel fine about it. Those who really have not found people that they can trust or they don't have employees, it feels threatening. It's their livelihood. And so on. So we ask these questions and we have some discussion at the outset, but I'm going to right now just stop my sharing and allow Dr. Walker to take us through the next portion. We're not hearing you, Dr. Walker, you're on mute. Let's switch to this.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yeah, you're now unmuted. I don't see you though.
You don't see me, huh? Now do you see me?
Yes.
Good. Let me just adjust my screen. There we go. All right, it's good to be here with you. I hope you can hear me. It's such an honor and a privilege to be part of what God is doing in and through your lives and also in mine. One of the things that I'd sent out was that when we teach this, when we hear this, it resonates. It says something in us that says, "Wow, this is really good." But until we do something with it, we don't know it. And the best way to do something with it is to find people to teach. So again, we encourage you to use this material in teaching others, and in the process of helping others do that and learn that, you will be instilling that in you. So please, every time you have, every chance you have, find someone to teach it, even if it's small sections. When we do the questions, as Renita has pointed out, and we get feedback from them, in education we call this priming. Priming prepares people to receive information that you want to focus on. But oftentimes, rather than simply going in and start lecturing, you want to prime them by asking them questions. How many employees do you have? How many of you left your business to be here? How many of you said you are a business person because you don't want to be someone else's employee? You want to be your own boss. All of these are priming them to prepare them to be able to hear the material that you give them.
Dr.
I
Walker?
like this
I'm not saying the
definition
French.
of leadership by Ken Blanchard.
Dr. Walker.
Anytime you seek to influence the thinking, behavior, or development of people toward a goal in their personal or professional lives, you are taking on the role of leadership. So let me just ask you this. Is there anyone who's not a leader in that definition? Because we are all, whether it's our spouse or our children, we're all seeking to influence them in what we believe to be the right way to think, the right behavior. So in one manner of speaking, we are all leaders. And when we understand that, the question is, what kind of leaders are we? I grew up in a home where my father was a disciplinarian. He was very strict. His word was law. And I tended to carry that on into my own family experience. And I realized at some point that you cannot change behavior simply by dictating rules. And that, unfortunately, tends to be what we do when we have this difference between boss and leader.
Dr. Walker.
And so you can
you
ask
hear
people,
me?
even before you put the slide out, what is the difference between boss and leader? Now, one of the
Phil,
things that we're trying
Walker.
to do here.
Dr. Walker. Okay. We're not
What?
getting the French. We're not getting the French subtitles. So I just stopped your
sorry.
sharing. If you could click on that and then start your sharing again.
All right, I did that. I don't know why. Slideshow. Presenter view. All right, I've got to go completely out then to do that.
It should just be that box that you click on slideshow for always
Right.
show.
Right, but unfortunately it is blacked out.
Sorry.
All right, so I've got always use subtitles above and French. They're all clicked.
Okay. Let's try
All
it
right,
again.
so we will try again. Oh, there we go. I apologize. I really thought
We're
we
not
had
seeing your
audio.
screen.
All right, I will share my screen. OK? Bonjour. Comment ça va? Can you see
It
it,
says
Renita?
listening at the bottom. It says
Huh?
listening, but it's not, it says listening at the bottom, but it's not showing.
Testing 1, 2, 3. I tested this a number of times, and I do not know why it's not. Let me try one other thing. Let me take it off of a presenter view. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Listening. I don't know why it can't hear me. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering if Renita can share the PowerPoint from her own screen. I'm wondering if you will help.
Sorry? Say that again?
Yeah, she was wondering if I can share it. I don't know what you made changes to though. So,
Well,
but I can share what I have if you want.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead and share it. I don't know why my computer can't hear, has a hearing problem. Let me know when you're ready.
All right, go ahead.
I don't see your screen. Okay, are you there?
Yep,
Is your screen on?
it's coming. All right. Can you see it?
Yeah, the French is on.
All right, unfortunately, I need to do one thing real quick, and that is now I need to make Emmeline co-host so that she can, host so that she can get us into groups. Stop sharing. Sorry for this, folks.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay.
Very well. How are you too? Very well, please.
All right,
Yes,
so you'll just have to tell me next.
Is your screen shared?
Yep, do you see it?
No?
Oh, yeah,
Maybe I'm the only one.
Are others seeing my screen?
Yes, we can actually see your screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Oui, nous pouvons nous.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
All right, are we ready?
Yes.
My apologies. When we talk about... Sorry?
We were ready long ago.
Thank you.
My apologies. When we talk about boss and versus leader, all of us know what we're talking about because all of us have had experiences, even with pastors and others who tend to be bosses. Our position in society often dictates how we respond and react to people who are in a lower position, which is very unfortunate because the idea is that to not be directive, not to be a bossing, so to speak, is a sign of weakness. And of course, it's not. It's a sign of grace. I remember being in the home of a well-known general in Kenya who was a remarkable man who had done remarkable things. At one point, the chief of staff of the army in Kenya. And I was struck that as we gathered in his home, he was the one who was helping his wife with the dishes. He was the one who gathered up the dishes after we ate. He was exhibiting in a natural way that sense of servant leadership. But here's what I want you to understand and what people need to understand. It's not a matter of just going through these things because leadership and bossing, whoever is at the top, builds an environment. And that environment is one that blossoms people or one that holds them down. So when you look at this screen, don't simply read the things that it says, but explain to people that it is the leader's responsibility to basically create an environment where they can blossom. And if they blossom, then basically you have an environment that will be a help to you as a business. We're all called to be servant leaders. What does it mean? A servant leader is first and foremost a servant. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to young leaders who are just coming out of Bible school or just starting their career, and they want to kind of skip this servant thing. They want to start their own organization. They want to become the leader. They want to become the boss because their experience is that the boss is the one that gets to tell everyone what to do. But that wasn't the model that Jesus used. It begins with a natural sense and desire of serving first. You need to help people, even business owners, even yourselves, develop a servant's heart. This is a conscious choice that brings one then eventually to become a leader or aspire to lead. The person who is like that is in sharp differentiation from making the leader the first thing and the most important thing. And thus we have the boss and leader. And the question is this: am I willing to follow Jesus as my leadership model? And what we want to do is bring everything back to the Word of God. And what does God say about leadership? And of course, He's the one that brought the leadership model to the foremost front of who we are and what we do, whether it's a business or whether it's a church. It's a different call. It's a call to serve, as Matthew 20:25 says. A different plan. Jeremiah says, I have a hope for and a plan for the future. But that is built around the servant Jesus. And we have a different audience. We're not doing our leadership for the people that we're leading. We're not trying to prove anything to them as much as we understand that our calling is to God alone. He is the audience. He's the primary audience on which everything else is based. Let's look at the servant leader characteristics. And this is, I think, very helpful to people. I think this is very helpful to people because it combines and blends this model of servant and leader. Let's go ahead and to the next slide. There we go. And what we're talking about, we've had many discussions, a servant, well, that just means you do everything what everyone says. No, not really. I mean, if you're just a servant, maybe that's true. But our service is not being a servant first to the people that we're leading, it's being a servant to God first. But when God makes us into a position of leadership, we have to blend this, and we blend this by helping people understand, helping people, having empathy with people. So what we want to do is two things. One is help people see that the servant leadership is a culture. It is an environment. And two, this is not weakness. Because when we do it God's way, His Spirit guides and directs us. And His Spirit operates and works throughout. So as you teach this, make sure that you're communicating. Because people have a paradigm when they come into the class usually of a boss. That's what they've seen. That's what they've heard. And what you're saying now is there's a different way. I like the next slide, and it shows the paradox. The paradox is simply this, is that how can you be a servant and also be a leader? Because in our minds, those two things are very different. So this slide basically looks at some of those qualities. But the key is not simply what we do, in other words, try and be disciplined or be spontaneous and be planned, but the environment that we create and the competencies that we build into people's lives, the competencies and the skill sets. So this whole idea of the servant leadership has to be balanced because, again, you're not being a servant exactly to the people you're leading first. You're a servant to the Lord. And that means that sometimes you have to do hard things. So you're not called to do whatever your employees say. You're called to do whatever God says. And it's an act of obedience. And sometimes, as we know, iron sharpens iron. We're called on to speak hard words and difficult things to people. But that doesn't mean you're not a servant, because what you're doing is teaching people how to hear the voice of the Lord. Let's go on to the next one. There are two main purposes, as Renita has already said. One is what we create. What are the things that we do? What are the services that we provide, or what are the goods that we provide? And people need to understand there's boundaries on these. You can't just do anything to make money. This has to be something that you feel the Lord is leading you to do. And this is important for people to understand. Sometimes they just want to go and make money. Well, money is a secondary outcome. It's not the primary outcome. The primary outcome is to find a reason for serving people. Where is the need? Every social need is a business opportunity. And then to do so as the Lord would lead you. And this brings us to the second one, which is critical, and that is that we would work with our employees, that they would experience the creativity that God made them with. So we go back to Genesis 1:28. Most of the time, people say they do business to put food on the table or to stay busy. But what we want is to bring people together and give them a focus in order that it would also release their creativity. So whatever service I'm doing, whatever product I'm building, we bring people together and seek to help them understand that we want them to be creative within the guidelines of this product or service. And that's critical because that's how God has created us and what He has created us for. To determine where you might be as a servant leader, ask these questions. Am I providing an environment that helps people develop skills, knowledge, spiritually and intellectually? This is competence. One of my heroes in management and leadership is W. Edward Deming, and he is famous for his 12 points. And I've put those already on the site, so you can download that and look at that. The second one, are they becoming healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous? It's like your children. You do not want your children tied to you when they're 40 years old or 50 years old. You want them to become independent and make good decisions, not reliant upon you. That same role in some degree as pastors. We want to bring people to the point where we release them to be the church and make those decisions. We also need to give them that environment to do that. When it comes to competency and skill sets and capacity, Deming says twice that we need to help people learn the skill sets that we are needed in our product or service, but also the skill sets, and this is a business thing, he says, the skill sets to make them better people. So we do Bible studies, we have prayer times within the context of our business. Let's go on. Is someone talking or do I keep on? Okay, so competencies are learned in 3 different ways or 3 different environments. The one environment is informality or informally. You know, when the kids are growing up or when your child's learning to walk, you don't give them a textbook and say, here's the 16 points of good walking. You basically experience it. They fall down, you pick them up. It's an informal learning. And what we have to understand is that 80% of our competencies, 80% of our skills in life are simply learned by growing up around us. There's a saying that we use. We become like those that we're surrounded by. And what we want the people to understand is that in their business, they're creating an environment. Is it an environment of learning? Is there learning going on just as they share from day to day? So part of it is an informal. This is no textbooks. This is just talking. You know, how often do you get together with other believers and you just dream and talk about the Lord? The next is non-formally. That means that there may be some structure to it, but it's not leading necessarily to a degree or not. Jesus, when he talked to the disciples, that it seemed like it was informal, but actually it was non-formal because he was teaching them things. So there are times we gather in seminars and conferences, and these are not degree leading, but they are information gathering and principles gathering. So we need people to understand that they're responsible also to helping people through offering training. And this is a big leap for people. We've seen this produce all kinds of benefits when people are given the freedom to either go to a conference or as employees or have a conference. So again, it's part of that environment. And this is what makes the difference between the boss and the servant leadership. The boss, it's all about me and my business and making money. The servant leader says, no, it's about serving people with a product or a service that glorifies the Lord, and an environment that lifts Jesus up. And that's not, you probably know, it's not that easy. But the last one is formally, and we see this in Ezra, who taught the people, who went through the scriptures in a sequence. And so when you go and take courses from somewhere, that leads to some kind of degree. These are all competencies, but they are also building capacity. How do you help your employees build the capacity that God wants them to have? Seizing an opportunity without capacity wastes energy and resources, and it could be dangerous. God wants us to be ready for the opportunities, but opportunities need to be prepared for prior to seeing them. Be assured that God has opportunities for you. And what we want people to know is that if they want their business to expand, they need to be planning not for today, but for tomorrow. Where is it going? How is it going? And what skill sets do we need? So rather than simply going out and finding someone who has those skill sets, let's develop those skill sets from within. Again, it's a change of mentality. Increased age should lead to increased capacity. Wisdom belongs to the aged and understanding to the old. Now, I wrote this some years ago, but I felt like it still is applicable. So let me go ahead and read. At 20, I feel like I can do anything. At 30, I'm committed. I want to do something. I want my life to count. At 40, I see what I could have done. At 40, we look back and we often see the missed opportunities, and that is part of the educational process. At 50, I wonder why I did what I have done. If we have not followed the Lord, then sometimes we look back and not only see the failed opportunities, but understand why I should have been doing some other things. At 60, I settle down to do what can be done. At some point in your life, and it may be 50, it may be 60, you understand your competencies, you understand your spiritual gifts, you understand your talents, and you settle down to flow into those. Now, 60 is an arbitrary number. At 70, my dream, I happen to be close to that number, my dream is to equip and help other people to live out their dream that God has given them, their vision that God has given them, to empower them to be all they can before God and people. I love this by T.D. Jakes. Give a church of 100 people to a pastor who has the capacity for 1,000 people, and 900 will come. Church growth. Give a church of 1,000 people to a pastor who has the capacity for 100 people, and 900 will leave. I've seen this over and over again. People want to dream big, they become pastors of large churches, but they don't have the capacity to lead. And business is the same way. We need to help people understand building capacity is critical to building potential and opportunity. Capacity building requires intentional planning. There's skill sets that, and this is one of the purposes of this course, is to build the skill sets and help people understand how to put these together. But the skill sets are done within the framework of an environment or a culture. And we want to hit that over and over again as we talk about it. Servant leaders build environments where others have opportunity to grow in their skills and capacity. So it's not simply the skills to do the product or service, but it's their capacity to be ready for opportunities. Smart businesses do that all the time. Focusing only on what needs to be done today misses the opportunity and potential of tomorrow. All right, we want to do a breakout. I'd like to have Renita put you into different teams or rooms. I have posted on the chat the question I would like for you to discuss. So if you could do that now, I thank you for the time that you've given me, and trust that God will help you to develop cultures of servant leadership in your own style, in your own organizations, and then pass that on to others in their businesses and ministries. God bless you. Thank you.
All right, and Emmeline, you're putting them into groups, into rooms, right?
Yeah, I've just sent the link.
Okay, good. So how do
You can
all
start
business?
accepting.
Yes, good. Thank you.
Hi, Fred. I see your hand up. I'm wondering why.
Hello?
Yeah, I was calling to notify you, say, my Sunday,
Okay.
Mr. Moses, you're outside.
Yeah, inside the somebody is there. I do not want to interrupt.
Oh, I see. All right. Welcome back to everyone. I think people are still coming. There we go.
Thank you.
I think that forced the issue. Now everybody's back. Good. All right, I want to have some time for a bit of a discussion of challenges that you see in the way, according to the chat that you just had. How do employers see employees? How do business owners see their employees? And where does training fit into that? So what are the challenges that you think, some of the people that you will be training, what are the challenges as it relates to relationships between employer and employee? Can anybody share what you discussed in your group?
Yes, group 5.
Thank you.
Group 5, we discussed that most employers see these employees like they are slaves. They don't take them to be like partners. And that's why most of them don't train their employees, because they want to keep them down there without any skills so that they can continue being their slaves. Because if they gain any skill, that means they will call for some increase in the salary.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you give them skills, they will call for an increase and they want more salary. All right, what's another challenge? Emmanuel.
Okay, so in room 3, we discussed and we said that one of the challenges you have is that if you are too quick to invest in the employees, then it might be challenging if they have not bought into the vision. They might not be able to add value to the business. And we looked at Jesus. We said Jesus had called them 12 apostles that followed him, but he did not invest equal time and effort to each one of them. I think he invested in them differently, and we thought that we shouldn't be so fast to invest, take time, and make sure that you know to what extent the employees have bought into the vision, and so that you can know how much resources you need to invest into them.
Okay, good. So understanding the value of investing and understanding also who you have working for you so that you can apply the investment that you make in them, even according to skills and so on. Pastor Alex, you were going to speak.
Yeah, I was going to speak. Yeah, we looked at both sides, a servant leader as well as the boss leader. The boss leader will, first of all, out of fear, not want to train their employees for the fact that if they became better, they may actually start a similar business or move on to be employed by someone else. So they will avoid as much as possible. But while on the other hand also, there are people who feel like I have employed you because of your set of skills. If you don't have the skills, go train, then you come back and do my work. So they avoid doing so. And as opposed to a servant leader who would want to equip and invest in their people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one, right? I mean, there's a truth that if you train and equip, they may leave. Does that mean then, therefore, you don't train and equip? When they leave, they're still taking some gifts with them, some resources that you've poured into them. But it's a challenge. How much do we do that? Somebody else.
Let me just throw in there before you call in somebody else. I think I appreciate training and equipping and investing in people. You earn more respect from them. They will serve you more diligent. They will be more committed to you than if you oppress or suppress them. So I think it's just like an upside down thing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and you're exactly right, because if you do invest in them, but you also then compensate them in a way that feels fair, people will tend to stay. Why would they move? If usually you move out of some sense of unhappiness, right? So you're not being treated well, or you're not being paid right, or you're not being valued. And then there are the few that will leave for wrong reasons. But I think you're right, by and large, that people value being valued. There's a saying that we have, the devil you know is better than the one that you don't, right? So, you know, if I know at least what my employer is how they are treating me, it's better than going to some unknown, possibly. Somebody else.
Yeah, hello. I've just came in, but I just want to drop something small.
Go ahead.
Some of the employees also are too proud. After taking the requisite training, you'll be showing off, saying a whole lot of things. The little thing you do, I'll leave. I'll leave. So at times, employers also have it difficult to give out the requisite training to employees.
Okay, so they know that they're holding something over you, that you need them more than they even might need you, because there's a demand. All right. Stephen. Two more people speak, so Elvis after that.
One of the things that brings the attitude in the employers not to train the employees is that they feel they have to keep away the secrets of their business successes. So by showing the employees what to do and how to do it best, they feel they are spilling out their business secrets. Maybe later on, this person might become a tough competitor and might even do better than them. So that's why they hold some of the attitudes and withhold training, because some of the training is hands-on and they need to be shown around how to do things, so that even if I take time like this today to come for training and I have to leave my employee at the workplace, they need to know how to go about things. And so that's why sometimes the employers don't train the employees.
Okay, good, thank you. Last one, Okasan, go ahead. Oh, and then we'll take voting. Yes.
You know, sometimes the aspect of the loyalty of the employees plays a great role, because sometimes after the employer has invested a lot in the training of the employees, he cannot pay them to a certain level, and other employers come along who have not made any expenses in that area, and they begin to offer more than the other employer is doing. So you see that the employees now begin to cross over because of the little incentive that comes. And so it becomes a challenge. So it becomes now a question of loyalty and integrity on the part of the employee. So you see that those who are loyal may stay, but those who are there, they are hirelings, they are there for the money, they will easily move to anywhere that something higher is offered. So it becomes challenging for the employers, and so they become very skeptical because training is costly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And they want to profit. Yeah.
Bodhi, go ahead.
All right, it's Bosse.
Bosse, I said Bosse before. You're coming up as Bodhi, so.
Yes. So I was saying that sometimes the employer don't see their businesses, their company or services as spiritual. So they are not seeing it like Jesus saw everything he's doing as spiritual. So he was training people to be better than himself. But when we look at what we are offering, it's not spiritual. If I'm running a school is a business, and so I can't take it as spiritual and then be training everybody to be better than me. When I train you to be better than me, you take my food from me. So the best thing is to be higher than you, and so I think that also affects the way we invest into employee and the way we could make room to invest in training them to be better.
Okay. And so Isaac, I'm going to let you speak yet, and then we'll go on.
Okay, in group 8, we discussed and saw that the way the employers view their employees is the factors of production. These are viewed as factors of production, and they are trained if that training is going to increase the productivity of the business. That is what we considered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are some real challenges, and we don't want to reduce this to something very simple because it is complex. But I liked what Noko-san was saying was the implication that it's about integrity and it's about loyalty. And I'm responsible as a manager to have integrity towards my employees and to also show a sense of loyalty that as the devotions looked at, that I'm committed to their provision, their protection, and their pleasure. Well, at least their provision and their protection. And so we have an obligation. We can't control what they do with that, but we can control what we do with that. And so one of the things that I hear with interviewing so many business people is the complaints of we can't find loyal employees, we can't find faithful employees. We can't find trustworthy employees. And because of that, we keep our business small. So we grow to the point that we are able to manage, but we aren't going to grow to the point of hiring people. And my challenge, in teaching this is to push people to say, and we're going to talk about risk management, that business is risky. One of the things that my mother taught me growing up is that you have a finger and we like to point to say, I can't find anybody good, right? But there are these other fingers that are pointing back to me. And so in management, am I investing in the person? Am I not just investing in the training, but investing in caring about who they are and what their concerns are and what their desires are and their joys are? Do they feel like they are part of the team? I don't maybe need to share everything with them, but they're going to know if I'm paying them a little bit and telling them that's all I can pay you, but they see that I'm taking for myself and my family a lot more. They're going to feel that inequity. And so I need to be committed to integrity and loyalty myself before I can expect it to be reciprocated. One of the reasons I think that there is a lot of employee distrust is because there's a sense that people feel, well, you're stealing from me. You're either stealing from me financially or in terms of my time, or you're not using my talent. And so therefore, I feel justified in stealing from you and using my time to do other things, or taking some of the things that don't belong to me. But there's the feeling of justification. So I think that part of this discussion when you're teaching this is to really encourage people to put up the mirror to say, what am I doing to create loyalty and to help integrity be there? How am I investing before I can expect people to invest back? So good. That's a difficult discussion. It's not, like I said, it's not easy. We're not certainly putting everything at the feet of the owner, the manager, but that's where we can start. That's where we can have some control. And then I think the majority of people appreciate that loyalty and they stay loyal to it, but not everybody for sure. All right, let's go on. Managing versus leading. As Dr. Walker was talking about, managers tend to focus on operations, systems, procedures, whereas leaders tend to focus on the bigger picture or vision. And one of the things that, again, not everybody is gifted to run a business. There's actually quite a small percentage, especially compared to a percentage of people who are doing business. And that's one of the reasons why we say we often need less businesses rather than more, but we need those people who have the gift of management, who can develop systems and procedures that are efficient, that allow people to flourish in their own job. We need those people to grow and be able to grow their business. But we've all had managers that are more of a leader than they are a manager, meaning they have these huge visions and great big ideas, and it's exciting, but they can't put the feet to the ground to make things work. And so management is a skill. And I think sometimes we need, as we're training, we need to talk about the fact that we may love what it is we are doing. I have a friend who's a pig farmer, and he now has about 14, 15 pig farms. And he laments the fact that he doesn't get to spend any time with pigs anymore, because he's grown into the management of it. Management is often removed from doing the actual work because you're managing the operations and the systems. And so we need some people to recognize, you know what, I want to work with pigs. Somebody else can do the management, and let's come together so that even if we view each other as competition, how can we come together to be collaborators, to be more efficient? Both leaders and managers need to be able to make things happen that require power and influence, authority and accountability, as well as effective ways to delegate. So these are both important to be able to do, and those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. So there's 7 skills of management. And again, these are skills that if you don't have them, you can learn them. Some people have them naturally. For others, it needs to be developed. The skill of planning, being able to look into the future, to forecast. This is where we want to be in 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years. So that's often, again, leadership has that, or there are the big picture thinkers. But then from there, from the planning, we have to go to goal setting. And I think I pointed out that session 4, where we do the goals, coming up with goals that are achievable, that are measurable, that are attainable, that we can do, that are realistic for us, is not easy. And for many of you in the quiz, I had to keep writing. These are nice sounding goals, but they aren't SMART. And I'm not trying to be insulting with that. I'm saying they're not specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And if we don't put those components to our goals, then oftentimes they won't happen. And so goal setting and breaking it down to the objectives and the strategies is a critical skill for management if you want to move forward. Otherwise, we have these great plans and we have these great desires, but we don't ever seem to be moving forward. So we see some people that are doing a business and they have what's on a tabletop, and we say, how long have you been doing the business? And the answer is 10 years. They haven't grown. Now, for some people, they don't want to grow. They just want to put food on the table, and that's fine. But for others, they want to grow, but they can't ever seem to move to that next step, which comes in goal setting. From goal setting, then it's decision making. How are we going to make the decisions of what objectives do we need to do in order to achieve the goals? What are the strategies that will help us get to those objectives? Then from there, we delegate. Being able to delegate means that you have some people skills, right? So you're developing relationships with people, and you're able to delegate and trust that they will do what you've asked them to do. And so you are putting faith in others, and they are responding to that. And from there, good managers provide support then. Once you delegate, you need to provide support. How is it going? You seem to not be moving forward on what we agreed that you would be working on. What's the holdup? What is the challenge? Communicating is critical. Again, helping people flourish means they have to be able to grow into something. They have to feel safe to communicate. They have to feel safe to talk about the challenges. They need to know that you care about that. And then the last one is controlling to plan. It's now making sure that the planning we did in number 1, as we set about doing it, and we're 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road, that we continue to keep that plan in our mind, and we continue to march forward on that. Again, for leaders, for visionaries, we may be going along and we see something else that catches our eye, and well, that looks good, and so we shift and we have to start over, and then 6 months later we see something else, well, that looks good, and we go in that direction. A good manager is somebody who's going to control to plan. You shift the plan when you have to, but it's not everything that's shiny catches our attention. We need to be able to say, this is where we are going. Yes, that looks good, and we'll look at that, but we continue to go down this path until until God tells us to move to something different. So those are 7 skills of management that are important for people to be able to recognize. And when you're teaching this, I would encourage you to stop and say, where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? What is a challenge for you? Again, delegating and providing support, that's management of personnel. Often with management of employees, there can be some discipling that takes place, and that discipling may come in the form of challenge, of confrontations, and so on. So not everybody can do that. Successful companies watch for trends. As a manager, you need to also watch trends. So is there an increase in global competition as the world becomes smaller through the internet and easier access to transportation? A good manager has their eye on what is going on in their business, right? But also in the industry and in the sector, and what is going on in the world. Another trend is the declining birth rate and the variance in age distribution in the developed world. Okay, so the average age in the US is, I think, 37 now. The average age in Europe is 45. The average age in Africa is about 19. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of our business? What does it mean in terms of demand? And so we need to be paying attention to those bigger things as well. The third trend has to do with how disposable income is spent, with a shift towards convenience and flexibility. And this is big. One of the things that we were seeing in many places, and you have told us as well, is people are wanting to order food. They want food delivered. They want convenience. They're willing to pay a little bit more as life is busier, especially in a capital city where you spend a lot of time in traffic. They want things that are convenient. They want flexibility to be able to use their time in different ways. And so again, a manager is going to be watching trends. They have to keep their eye on the big picture and spend time thinking about that. And that's why we say we work smarter, not harder. A good manager is going to separate time for themselves to do some thinking and maybe have some strategies on how to make themselves aware of what is going on in the world. Maybe they're part of a business association that allows them to have some of those conversations and hear about things that they aren't aware of. Maybe they're part of some online business groups that also help them with that. But that's an important part of a manager as well. Successful companies spot fundamental changes in the world and create opportunities from them before these changes take hold in the general population. So for most businesses, a problem or need is an opportunity in disguise. And so I think it was George Aite, an economist from Ghana, who said every social problem is a business opportunity. And it's very true, but we need to be willing to seize those opportunities. Successful companies use teams to innovate and develop products quickly. So again, there's that flexibility of being able to change, but not changing every time there's an opportunity, knowing which opportunities are good for you. Forming partnerships with other companies in their industry. And this is critical. It's so inefficient for us to have 50 people selling the same thing in a small area. It's much better if we come together, form partnerships for the supplies, form partnerships for getting the customers, and so on. Those are things that successful companies tend to do. And then put the customer at the center of everything they do, and we talked about that in session 10. So one of the things we want to confirm, though, and affirm for people is that business is risky. Business is not something that's guaranteed. In fact, majority of businesses fail actually within the first 5 years for the first time. And research shows that the second business that people have, the majority of them are successful. And so we have to be willing to take a risk, have a problem with it, learn from it, and go again. And so this is a fun activity to do in the course, in the session, is to ask, how risky are you? You know, how many of you would jump out of an airplane with a parachute? Usually very few people put up their hands. How many of you would ride an elephant? Maybe a few more people would put up their hands. How many of you would ride a horse? Again, more people put up their hands. How many of you would ride a donkey? More people will put up their hands. And so in doing this exercise, what we're saying is the majority of us aren't built for high risk, thankfully. If the majority of us were built for high risk, there would be a lot more challenges in the economy. But some people are built that way, and they need to be the ones to take those risks. And so we have different levels. Many of us would at least get on a donkey. That's the minimal risk that we can take. And so we have to assess for ourselves, how has God created us, and how do we handle risks? Some of us run to danger. You know, give me something challenging. I want to do something challenging. And other of us run away from that. And we need all for us to be able to have an economy grow, to take risks on certain new products, to create a new product and to put it out there. Unfortunately, many people who are the creators of new products often don't end up getting the financial benefit because other people will come in and see that and then copy it and sell it themselves. But we still take that opportunity, that gifting that God has given to be creative. And so we have to know for ourselves. But what this does is it leads us to the conversation about risk management. And a manager needs to understand the different risks involved in doing business and how to deal with some of these. So the first one is obvious, financial risk. Running a business is a financial risk. You are investing your money, often your capital. You're putting your talent in and your time into a business that's risky because it could fail. You could invest a lot of yourself in it, and then something happens. So we all know that financial risk is definitely there. Another risk is currency or exchange risk. Fluctuations in the exchange rate can affect anyone dealing with imported materials or exporting materials. We just completed our 2 years of research in northern Ghana, and the currency fluctuation from December 2017 to December of 2019 was definitely a factor in how successful some businesses were. Those who were dealing with imports or exports were certainly challenged. And so that's a risk. You can't control it. All you can do is try to mitigate. Credit risk. Most businesses feel compelled to extend credit to customers. This can be risky. How do you follow up with those? If you don't give credit to everybody, how are you going to say no in a culture that you know, doesn't like no? It wants yes. It wants you to be caring about the community. How do you deal with the credit risk when doing the business? Can you separate the business from yourself in order to protect it? Again, I think a lot of businesses end up failing because they extend so much credit to people and they don't know how to collect on it. So they have a huge accounts receivable, but no chance of getting it back. And so basically, they weren't really running a business. It was more of a hobby. There are some people, I think Emmeline talked about, that they needed constant injections of capital every year, every 2 years. And it's because they're not really running the business as a business. They're running it to keep themselves busy as a hobby because they can't say no to people. It's very difficult for them to separate themselves from the business. All right, it's telling me subtype, please try restarting. So I'm going to see whether now it's starting. It's not. All right, sorry about that. The French stopped, and so now I need to see if I can get that back up. All right, the fourth type of risk is a security risk. Having capital, inventory, or resources put the business at risk for those who want to steal. So that's another risk, right? The bigger you grow, the more capital you have, the more threat you are to somebody breaking in. So we have to think about that and worry about that and have different things in place to protect property risks, the possibility of financial loss as a result of owning real estate, storms and floods. Right now we have several cyclones and tropical storms and hurricanes that are coming in the US. Those people that live in those areas have to deal with those types of losses. Floods, I heard today in, where was it? Northern, I forget which country was talking about that. Oh, Cameroon. And so that's a challenge again. How do we deal with some of those risks? Regulatory risks. Businesses are often at the mercy of the government as it relates to regulatory obligations. What happens if suddenly the government tells you you have to do ABC in order to meet the standards for them to allow your business to stay open? You're at the mercy of some of those government decisions. Legal risk. When you sell a product or a service, you're at risk of being sued by the customers. Thankfully, that's not in Africa as much as it is in North America, but it will probably move that direction. You say that your product does ABC. It didn't do it for me. Maybe my daughter or son took that product and they got sick. Now you're falling at risk for a lawsuit. Information technology risk. Hacking is becoming an increasing issue as more and more people are buying online, mobile money, and so on. How do you protect your customers? How do you protect your own finances in terms of information technology? Country or political risk. I think many of us understand the challenges that if there's instability, our businesses usually feel that effect quite quickly. And that is why we recommend 3 months of fixed costs in savings. So that if something like COVID happens, right, that wasn't a country or political risk, that was a pandemic, that if we had to shut our business, that we would be able to still keep it running, pay our rent, pay our different costs for 3 months at least until things would come back. And then the last one is a reputational risk. When you do a business, you're putting your reputation out there. We talked about happy customers tell 3 people, unhappy customers tell 3,000. You put yourself at risk in terms of your reputation when you say, I'm doing something that can help you with whatever, and then it doesn't happen. People can talk badly very quickly. And so there are definite risks when it comes to running a business, and managers need to be aware of these. There are tools that we want to talk about to manage that risk, prevention and safety procedures. We should have those in place. What happens when there's a fire? We need to have fire extinguishers. We need to have maybe security, although sometimes security themselves are the problem. And so how do we deal with some of these risks? We need to control our environment, making sure that there are not trip hazards or safety hazards for either employees or customers. We need to be monitoring. This isn't something you can do once. There needs to be ongoing monitoring. Sometimes we need to have renter insurance for the contents of our business. We need to have medical insurance for our employees. We need to have, different types of insurance. Certainly, if you have a vehicle, you have car insurance. Hopefully not just because the government tells you to, but because you want to also protect your assets. Another thing people do is what is called hedging. We diversify our income streams. We don't put all of our eggs in one basket. So we make sure that if something happens in agriculture, let's say there's flooding or there's a drought, we also have this other thing. We have pigs or we have goats. We are not putting all of our eggs in one basket just in case one has a problem. We have some other options. And then we also have response plans and resilience. So we train our employees on what to do in case of A, B, C, whatever happens. And so those, again, are management responsibilities. God is the owner of this business. We have a responsibility to try to protect it. We can't control everything, but there are some things that we can do to help. All right, workforce management. How do we promote creativity without losing productivity? And so workforce is one of the things that we will, in the normal session, we'll spend some time on. We're not going to spend so much time on it today. How do we promote creativity without losing productivity? How do we have a workforce that can contribute as to the business in terms of their time and their treasure and their talent? And so we can have some discussions about this. We had some of that earlier in our discussion. Hiring people to work for you is a cost, but it can also benefit your business. And people have some real challenges. What are the challenges of hiring someone? We've talked about some of those. How can it benefit you? And so I'm not going to go through all of these because we've talked about some of those, but we do have to think about when it comes to workforce management, what are some of the legal requirements that have to be considered? What are some of the training that needs to be considered? You have one or two people who are working for you. Do you have a team meeting every week? It feels funny to do that, but how do you continue to bring in people into a team to make them feel like they are a part of it? What type of planning do you need to do? What is the level of experience and education that you will be looking for? The subtitles have stopped again, so I'm going to see if I can get them started. What do you actually need to help people come on board in a way that's going to help the business grow? What's the minimum level of experience or education? And one of the things that we talk about is I can train skills, I can teach skills, but I can't teach passion. How much passion do you need from a person for your particular business versus skills? How can you compensate if you find somebody who's very passionate about mushrooms, for example, and yet doesn't have a lot of skills in mushroom farming? Would you rather have somebody who has skills in mushroom farming, but is really having their eye on going into becoming a teacher or something like that? All right, what salary will you pay? It's a critical discussion. How do you compensate when it's your business and you put all the sweat equity into getting it going? What are the legal requirements? Again, every country is going to be different. And so having some discussions about the legal requirements, how to report them to the government, how to pay those taxes for withholding and other things. All right, how do you find a staff? How do you recruit candidates? Sometimes a pastor will come to you and say, I have somebody in my church who really needs a job. Can you help them? Do you take that person? What are the conditions that you would have? How do you make sure that they understand This is a business. This isn't a family. This isn't a relationship that's built on just loving your neighbor. That becomes part of it when you find the right person, but it's about helping the business flourish so that the customers can also flourish. And so there are procedures that we go through for finding the right people, conducting background checks, getting those references, as Caroline said last week, putting a job offer in writing. Even if somebody is hawking for you, they're taking your goods and they're going out, put something in writing, make it formal so that they understand the seriousness of the relationship. Provide a testing period. That's a very good way to protect yourself. This will be a trial for 30, 60, 90 days. If it doesn't work, then we just part ways, no harm done. That lets people know as well that there are some expectations in terms of performance. Hiring family members, again, there's pros and cons to that. Some families have excellent family businesses. They're able to do the work and still protect the business and the family relationship. For others, it's very difficult. So having that conversation when you're training is good. Find out how to pay them by looking at others and doing the evaluations and so on. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You can spend a good amount of time when you're teaching this to really look at how we are doing hiring people and keeping that in a way that is valuing them. So vacation time, how to incentivize things. Caroline talked about the myths of that. And all of that also leads to the customer relations. So that's why we talk about that there. But the next part of management that we want to look at then is time management. And we're considering having a separate class on just time management because so many people say that they struggle with this. We all have 24 hours in a day. What are we doing? How do we manage time? And so we have some fun stuff. I'd like to schedule a time management seminar on my calendar as soon as I can find the time to buy a calendar. So it's a struggle, and we talk about these myths. And it's important to understand that in this presentation, these 10 management are considered myths, but we can have a discussion about them. Can we actually manage time? Well, we can use it wisely or we can waste it. I think that to some degree that's splitting hairs over the terms. But we can't save time for sure. We can only use what we have. Once it's gone, it's gone. It involves getting more done in less time. Well, actually not always. It means that sometimes we have to get less done and do it better. And we've become part of a world that where our phones, in fact, some of you, when you unmute, I can hear you on your phones. So we're taking a class and we're on our phones at the same time. We're taking a class and we're trying to multitask. And the reality is that it's impossible for us to multitask. Your brain is not able to concentrate on two things at once. So sometimes the wisdom is saying, time management is saying, I'm going to shut my phone off. I'm going to turn the internet off so I don't see emails coming in, so that I can set my priorities in doing my management. Sometimes lists are helpful for some people. Sometimes it's just another thing that we need to do. I'm the type of person that I love lists, but sometimes I don't use them, and so I make a list after the fact just to feel good that I can cross things off and say that I finished what was on my list. So for some people it helps, for others not so much. Sometimes a personal organizer is going to help, but people often are not organized because of the system. They're organized because they make a decision to manage their time, and it's one structure that helps them in that. I have a friend who is the most disorganized person. Time is just very fluid to her. And she has bought every personal organizer that there is on the market to help her. But the reality is she loses them as quickly as she buys them. And so it's not something that will actually help her. A quiet hour is a great time management tool. And that's true. I still recommend that every week people take 2 hours that they set aside to do management things, whether it's trying to look at the big picture, whether it's to look at the bookkeeping, whatever it is, but treat that time as sacred. On the other hand, if a customer comes during those 2 hours and they're a big customer and nobody's there to handle it, you need to still be willing to be interrupted and then get back to it as well. Some people keep time logs. We have somebody with the DML team who every day keeps a log of what they are doing. And that's fine, but again, that's somebody who's already managing their time, that's something that will necessarily help you, although for some people, it's very good to log those. Interruptions, again, sometimes some of that is part of business, and so you need to be willing to be interrupted. And so on, we can talk about these. Time is money. It's more than that, right? And so one of the things I love about the warm culture in Africa is that it affirms relationships. And so people will often say, you know, African time. And there's a part of me that loves the fact that relationships are more valuable than tasks. I grew up in a culture where time is about efficiency. And in efficiency, you lose relationship. And so there's pros and cons to these. And what we want to really do is help people understand God's time. What is God calling for you to do with your time? And are you honoring that? He's called you to be in relationship with people. He's also called you to run a business. How can you balance those things? And so it's about balance. One of the things we encourage people to use is this type of table that helps us categorize what is important, what is not important, what is urgent, and what is not urgent. And when we can decide those things, when we look at our calendar and we say that something is important and it's urgent, then we need to do it now. But oftentimes we have things that are important to do and they are not urgent. And so we are able to put them off, or we're able to put them on the calendar. And then we still need to remember, though, that they're important, even if they're not urgent. One of the biggest time wasters are things that are not important and not urgent, but other people want us to think that they are important and urgent. And so we have to be in some control of ourselves to know what is God calling me to do is not the same as what God is calling somebody else to do. What is important for me and what is urgent for me? What can I delegate for other people to do? What do I need to eliminate? What do I say yes to that I make sure that I can do? So for me, anything that comes up that I need to do, I immediately throw it on a calendar so that I know, even if I say that on Monday I'm going to do A, B, or C, I may decide at what point during the day I'm going to do that, or I may move it to another day again. But if I don't put it on the calendar, there's a good risk that I'll forget it. So it takes me 2 seconds on my phone to put it on my calendar, to call so-and-so or to do something. And that way, when I comes to that point, I can again decide to delay it if it's not urgent, or I can get it done and out of the way, but it keeps me remembering what my tasks are. This is just another way to help people to decide what different things belong in the different categories. But some of the tips are, take 30 minutes of your day to plan your day. Ask for God to lead you in that. Ask for Him to, maybe at the beginning of the week, if you can't do it every day. Spend no less than 1 hour a week on management issues. A lot of people say, I don't have time for that. And I would argue that if you want your business to be successful, it's not something that you should ignore or put off. We can spend a lot of time, again, on the non-urgent, unimportant things, but this is something that is, for many of us, important and urgent, and we need to prioritize that, and we need to find a way to be uninterrupted, unless it's very important, so that we can be successful in our bookkeeping, keeping the roof on our business, in understanding what is going on in the big picture, and so on. All right, so these are our other tips that we can go through. Then from time management, we go to inventory management. Sometimes I skip this if we don't have a lot of people dealing with inventory, if we have more people who are service related or agricultural, but knowing how to keep track of your inventory is important. I'm the type of person, again, for me, time is about efficiency. So I don't like to go to a business to purchase something and they don't have it. Usually that only has to happen once and I'll find another place. So having the inventory for your customers that they can rely on at all times is very important, and understanding how to keep that product so that it's fresh. We don't have the best buy date coming up too often that we end up having to sell at a loss. We don't have a lot of our stock being on our shelves, our money tied up in things that are not moving very quickly. There's an art and a science to that. And so we want to look through how to manage your inventory more effectively. Why it's important for us to make sure that our inventory is moving, that we are keeping customers, but we also aren't storing up for the next year and having some issues as it relates to that. There's two different types. There's a first in, first out. How do you manage your inventory, or your last in, first out? There's different theories on that. Most people do first in, first out. I sell what I got first before I move on to the inventory that I got later. And sometimes that's a challenge. If the inventory changes the price, you know, how do you manage that as well? So those are some conversations that you can have. We need to ask the questions. How are you currently implementing inventory management? What process do you have? How closely do you follow it? Do you have multiple suppliers? You don't want to have, again, all your eggs in one basket. Somebody has a problem, they're your supplier, and suddenly you have a problem getting that inventory. Having more than one is important. From inventory management, then we move on to sustainability. And sustainability relates to the quadruple bottom line. And one of the things that we want to be able to look at in sustainability is not just that it's good for the environment, but also that it's good for our business. So they say that in 5 years, maybe less than that now, there will be no access to international markets for companies that do not show respect for the environment. It's becoming fundamental to international trade. And so for many people, for many countries, they are asking, before you come in, what is the cost of the environment? What are you doing to mitigate some of that? So it becomes another risk that you have to keep in mind. No longer, and I hope that becomes more and more, no longer can we just produce without considering the impact. Unfortunately, many developing countries who are eager for jobs or eager for companies to come in are sacrificing the health of their citizens by allowing companies to come in who do not do good for the environment, that actually produce harmful effects for the citizens. And so what we want to do is to be able to look at what is our own footprint in our business. What are we doing? And how can we both protect the environment, but also reduce our own costs to be a benefit. So there's an organization called Sustainability, and they define this as ensuring long-term business success while contributing towards economic and social development, a healthy environment, and a stable society. And certainly, even though this is not a Christian organization, we would say as Christians that we also want long-term business success, contributing with an economic bottom line, social development, loving our neighbor, a healthy environment, and a stable society. And so we have to ask ourselves where we are at. And I remember, when we started this many years ago, most of us didn't have a good understanding of environmental. There was environmental impacts. There was not a lot of awareness. And since then, I think that awareness has grown to more understanding. Understanding has grown to more acceptance. Acceptance has grown to more commitment, and commitment has grown to action. And so that's the path that we need to take. We first need to become aware. So many of the countries where you are have bans on plastic bags, and I pray that someday the US will do that as well. No plastic bags. Africa, I think, actually takes the lead in banning of plastic bags, and it's because people have gone on this journey of the awareness of what plastic is doing to the environment, what it's doing to our fish, what it's doing to the salt even, because it's ending up in our oceans. From there, we have a greater understanding. We accept that that's a problem, and then we make a commitment to do something about it, and then we take action to say, that's it, no more plastic bags. And so for all of us in our businesses, from the source, right, of wherever the things that you are doing, whatever the source is coming from, to the use, to the disposal, there needs to be a greater awareness that follows this path for ourselves as business owners, for our employees, for the community. So one of the ways that we want to help business people understand the importance of this is by also making it personal, that you will save costs. When you begin to look at all the areas of how to reduce your footprint, the imprint that you leave on this creation, you will begin to save costs. You will begin to find ways to reduce the waste, to reduce the environmental impact. And the interesting thing, I think, is that this organization called Sustainability also says that keeping employees and treating employees well is good for the business. When you don't have to constantly train and interview and lose your staff because you're not treating them well, it's bad for the business. So you make reductions for the environmental impacts, and when you treat your employees well, it's going to be good for your business. It's also going to be good for the world. You increase your revenues by improving the environment and benefiting the local economy. A lot of customers are now looking for that. Often when I go shopping, I don't have an example by me, but I'm looking for something that says made of 50% recycled paper, or plastic bottles will say made from 70% recycled plastic. That's something that customers are starting to look for, and we want to know that the business that we're interacting with has also caring for the environment. It helps to build our reputation. It reduces risk for losing people who are caring about that. But then also, as we are caring about the products, we're also caring about people. We develop human capital, which we've talked about. So some of the compelling cases. It used to be that people who cared about the environment were those who could afford to care about it, and that has changed. We have now seen that those who have care about sustainability, about the environment, they see an increased revenue of 9%. They reduce their energy. They reduce the amount of energy they're using by 75%, moving to other ways or other solar or other ways of producing energy, or just turning things off. Reducing waste by 20% will save the company money. What is the waste that we have, and how can we reduce it? Reducing the amount of materials that we use, then by 10%. Increase productivity a little bit, but reduce turnover is 25%. And I think a lot of us would say that, when we lose an employee, it takes time to find a new person and to train them and to get them up to task again. So keeping that employee is going to be very important. Some of you said that some employees will hold that over on you. And so there's a balance that needs to come with that. But here they're arguing that there can be, when you take the approach of sustainability, it can definitely be a benefit for your business. Knowing what to do. So some of the challenges of this is understanding what needs to be done. It takes us doing some inventory and some analysis to understand from the creation, where our product is coming from, to the usage, to the disposal. How can I get involved in that? How can I make my decisions to decide which impacts present the greatest risk to the company? What are the risks currently for my company in what I'm doing? If I'm selling charcoal, for example, what can I be doing to participate in tree planting? If I'm involved in agriculture and I need to use pesticides, what can I do to allow the earth, to maybe do some rotation so that the earth is able to recover again? What are the costs and the benefits of doing those things? Obtaining the accurate measurements and to be able to assess whether or not your business is benefiting from it can be a challenge. The cost-benefit trade-off can be unclear. And so there are challenges to this. But it's something that we want to encourage, that we have an obligation. We have an obligation to be stewards of the resources. We have an obligation to be stewards of the environment. And unfortunately, I think the church has tended to be followers and not leaders in this. We tend to follow those organizations who are sounding the warning about caring for the earth, and they often are not Christian organizations. And so sometimes the church has the idea that God has given us all things, and they say that, you know, we're so heavenly focused, we're no earthly good. We concentrate on saving of souls, but in the meantime, we are still on this earth, and we don't know when Jesus will return. And so we have an obligation from Genesis 1:28 to be stewards, to subdue, to control in a way that will help care for the earth, from Genesis 2:15, to care for the world. And so we can't just say we're waiting for Christ to return, because in the meantime, there's 7.5 billion people. So that brings us to the end of the session on management. You can see there's a lot of content there. There's a lot that can be considered and discussed. There are different assignments from the manual that people will need to turn in. Their management team and operations worksheet. They need to consider who is in their management team right now. They need to put together their own CV or their resume. And we have in the book kind of a sample of how to lay that out. Often, again, it's part of it is looking at who do you have, who do you need, and where are the gaps? What do we want to find in a potential employee? What are the requirements to being an employee? There's a worksheet where people work through what are they looking for. If they want to hire somebody within the next year, what type of person are they looking for? What will be the procedure that they go through? And then to revisit again the environmental bottom line in light of sustainability. What is it that I can do? Oftentimes, in looking at people's business plans, the environmental bottom lines ends up being sweeping the area, keeping the area, the environment around their business clean. And to be honest, most people do that already. And so we're trying to raise the bar a little bit higher. What can we do beyond that? What can we do? That's good. Keeping your environment clean is very important. Customers certainly want that. But what can we do to go further? What are some ideas that we have with that? So a few different assignments that people are expected to do. That brings us to the end of session 11. And I just want to have us, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, to have us get into some discussion of this. What are some of the challenges that you believe that people face in terms of management? So we talked about the employees already, something other than that, as far as risk management, as far as time management, as far as inventory management, as far as even management of being a steward of creation. I'd like us to get into some small groups now, have Emmeline send us into our breakout rooms to talk about the challenges, that some of the important challenges that you see, that if you were doing a training, you might emphasize this more than others because you see that as more important, something that threatens businesses and is a challenge for people in your own context and so on. So let's go into our groups for about 7-8 minutes and have some talk about what you would emphasize as a trainer.
Sending you into groups.
Thank you, Emily.
Pastor Nicholson, what was your group? I see you moved. Isaac, if I could know your group, I could put you back in.
I was in group 8, but the first time, but by the time we were going to the groups, I had lost network.
Okay, let me send you back to 8. Pastor
Okay, thank you.
Nicholson, what group were you in? Okay.
Here they come. All right, welcome back, everybody.
Thank you, Renita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to hear, if you were training, where would you spend your time? What would you emphasize? What are some of the key management challenges that you think people have? Solomon, go ahead.
Okay, in room 7, we actually said one of the key challenges is time, keeping on to time. When we don't tend to keep to time, it affects the entire process in the training, whatever it is. Time management is a very, very aspect to spend a lot of time on. You can imagine if we cannot even keep time for ourselves, ability to keep time with the customer or people, it affects our productivity. It wastes, we have a lot of waste, and so many things negatively tends to happen in our inability to keep to time. So we discuss more around time. There are other things, but then time happens to be more of the priority.
All right, have you found ways to teach people? I know that you are a business consultant, Solomon, so have you found ways to teach people how to keep time that are effective?
Usually, I tend to use a lot of tools to get them engaged, but then you can't do that while you're teaching. So you have to plan very well and ensure that the action one has to take must be very effective. So if I can't keep to time, it will be very difficult to ensure that other people keep to time. So in training, it's very, very important that one's commitment to keeping time to himself first is very, very vital. And if I can do that, then it makes it easier for other people to flow. So I set it up as a challenge for myself. I just came in from a week training in Maiduguri, and thank God we kept the time till the end. You know, it wasn't funny, but we saw commitment in the people. So imagine if we continuously come late, the people in themselves will show up late. So I think the trainer have to be that example. for the people.
Excellent. And so that's something actually that we get into a lot as trainers is, you know, people come late. And so what we end up doing is we punish the people that come on time by making them wait. And a number of times I've started classes with one person in the room and trying to reinforce that we will start on time, we will end on time. And people, you know, they do eventually come along when they realize that it's serious. Oftentimes when we think, oh, they don't start on time anyways, they don't rush to get there on time. So there's a self-fulfilling prophecy to that. All right, Emmanuel, go ahead.
Well, in our group, it's something that we agreed would emphasize inventory management because it's hard to have a picture of the business and what is happening in the business and whether you're making progress or not if you do not have a picture of your inventory. So that is something that in our context is not emphasized a lot and people don't pay attention to. We agree that is something worth emphasizing in the class.
Okay, good. Inventory management. Thank you for that. Pastor Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm interested in environment. Sorry, if doing the training because we live in a country where the regulations on environment is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
As others places like mines, we have a lot of problems. So I think I will lay more emphasis on environment because of it's even going to endanger our lives. Apart from the fact that we as Christians, we have been mandated to keep the Great Commitment.
Yeah.
And so we see that in this country, we are having serious challenges with the environment. So I believe some time ago we met in Ghana, I think a year ago, and I saw an example that nobody is going to use plastics. So we're giving water bottle to be refilling. That's a very good example. The places that we are doing the training, what are the signs of environmental compliance? Are we complying? Are we using plastics? How clean is the place? So we have to set that example. And I think if I'm doing training, that's the area that I will lay much more emphasis on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Very important as well. Stephen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, something we'll emphasize in our training is the risk management. You find that some of these small and medium enterprises operate in markets, and these markets are temporarily built. We have had fire burning down markets, and the business people lose their merchandise, and they start all over again because they didn't take note on how to manage the risks that are associated with the fire burning their markets, and also preserving perishable commodities. How do they preserve perishable things so that they don't run the risk of losing everything within a short time and they keep making losses? So the aspect of preparing for risks, even in some people's offices, of course, as we shared that there are no fire extinguishers, there are no plans how to manage things that will affect our products or our inventory. In the end, people lose because they are not prepared for the risks that come with what surrounds their business. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So, you know, I'm sure that you all have seen too that not everybody has the same level of risk that they're comfortable with. Not everybody has the same amount of management skills. And so, you know, the question is what can we grow in and what can we develop and how do we handle some of those things? One of my pet peeves when it comes to both inventory management and sustainability is, what do you call, so I have a bottle of sanitizer here and there's a date on there. What do you call the date that's on the sanitizer or on any food product? what do you call that date? Somebody can unmute and say.
Expiry date.
Expiry dates.
You're right. That's what everybody calls it, but you're wrong. It's not an expiration date. It's what we call it. We've been kind of all tricked into believing that it's an expiration date. But oftentimes, in fact, this one even says EXP, expiration date. A lot of people have now changed it to say the best buy date, because the reality is that this does not expire the day after June 2022. One day it's good, the next day it's bad. It's not an expiration date. It is a best buy date. And normally the date they put on is when it's at the peak, at the peak of it's how it's best. And after that, it starts to decline. Now there are some products that decline goes very fast, like milk, right? You know, so milk, you'll have a best buy date, and very quickly after that, it goes bad. But something like this or other things, the best buy date, it means that it was maybe good for this is good for 2 years, right? It's probably going to be good for another 2 years past the best buy date. Now, that's just something that we have to think about. And so I know that if we run a provision shop, you don't want to sell things past the best buy date. That's why you have to be careful with that. But as consumers, we also need to recognize that we don't throw things away just based on a date that nobody is actually controlling. The only date that is controlled by government is, in some countries, is the date that's put on baby formula because it actually impacts babies' health. But most people don't take, there's nobody regulating the date that is put on. And so in the US, we have, I think 40% of all food that is produced goes to the landfill. 40%. That's huge. People are throwing things away left, right, and center that are still good. And so those are things that we have to also just be aware of and educate ourselves on. That we are being careful with our inventory, that we are being careful with our stock, but that we also have a better understanding, and we begin to change the language from an expiration date to a best buy date. So you know, those are things that we look at for sustainability as well, to not be wasteful as we are taking care of what God has given us. Good, and I see Dr. Geiger wrote the challenges, bookkeeping in terms of management. And it's true, we talked about that in session 7 and 8, but that's part of management, is taking that time, taking the time to be committed. And the reason I asked the question for time management is, you know, we could do a class on time management, but I think, as Solomon pointed out, it really is about putting it into practice, making a decision about priorities. That's one of the reasons why my pastor has always said, you know, you're not allowed to say you're too busy. Manage your time. Figure out what your priorities are, and then figure out how to be disciplined with that. So good. Lots of stuff that can be covered though in management. Session 11 is very rich. Again, we want to continue as trainers to emphasize God is the owner. You are the managers. You don't get to decide on your own. You need to consult with the owner for where it is that you place your priorities, and to make sure that you're hearing from the owner as well. God walked with Adam and Eve daily, and gave input to them as managers of the Garden of Eden, and he will do the same with us when we consult him. All right, I'm now going to move us on to session 12. And I'm sure that, as you saw in the video, session 12 is short. And the reason for that is because there's an expectation that you will have speakers come in. This is the last session. By this time, people are aware it's the last session. They've gotten a little tired. They may be behind in their homework, in the different pieces for their business plan that they need to put together. And so it's good that we bring some speakers in to help bring a breath of life back into the session as well. And so in this session, we're looking at other management logistics, more paint on the walls, if you were, registering your business, paying taxes, and then sources of funding. We start, of course, with a devotion, and we won't go through that, except that I love this particular devotion. It was a Nigerian that first presented this to me from Galatians 6:7-9, and we talk about don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get rid of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. And so there are some principles that we bring out from here, and it's a great devotion to have some discussion on. Principle number 1, you may sow your seed in the dark, but the harvest will not always stay in the dark. And so sometimes we think that we can get away with something. And so we are doing something that we shouldn't do in terms of integrity. And we think that it will stay in the dark, but usually a harvest, when we sow a seed, it will come into the light at some point. Principle number 2, the harvest will always be the same as the seed. You can never plant maize and reap beans. And so that's an important thing to think about. What is it that we are planting? And we're hoping to get something different, that if I just do this, and again, coming back to integrity, if I just do this, I'm just doing it to help me. My intentions are not to hurt anybody, but the harvest that we bring often will relate to the way in which we planted and the seed that we planted. And then principle number 3, the harvest will always be bigger than the seed. You can't sow a seed of corn and just get one other seed. It is always bigger. Therefore, be careful what you sow. And so that's the good news, right? The good news is that the harvest is always bigger. But we also need to understand that when we're planting something that is not good, the harvest may be bigger. And so that is why the Bible talks about from generation to generation, when we sow those seeds that are not good, it often is there's growth and an expansion that happens that we didn't really want. So we do need to be very careful. So our objectives for session 12, it's best to have someone from government speak to the class on taxes and registration, as well as access to capital. If you can't get a speaker to come in, then present these slides as best you can. I often would have a speaker come in and would not even open the slides. We wouldn't even have the PowerPoint come up. It's not necessary to redo what others are coming in. And here's the reason why we want somebody to come in to talk about taxes and registration. I was working in one country where we were talking about the tax officials that were coming to the businesses and threatening them. They were saying, you know, this is what you owe, and if you don't pay it, we're shutting you down today. And so people would say, oh, please don't do that. You don't shut me down, and let me just give you this. All right, that's fine. I'll come back in a week, but you know, you'll need to prepare what you have to pay by then. And so the next week, the tax official would come back and, you know, have you come up with that money? No, I can't come up with it. It's too huge. And let me give you this again, please. Just let me go for one more week. So we added up what people were paying in bribes, and we found out that they were paying more in bribes than if they knew the actual amount that they needed to pay for taxes. And so that was an important lesson to say, we need to have a tax official come in and teach, somebody who has no incentive for saying something different, to come in and show people how tax is calculated and how they can calculate what they owe for themselves. We also, of course, need to emphasize the fact that paying taxes is something that's important to do. It's important that the government is able to do what it needs to do, which is to provide, it's supposed to provide a level playing field, right? So creating roads so that business can happen, helping with schools so that people can get educated to do the business, helping the infrastructure in terms of water and so on. So paying taxes is a good thing, and it's the right thing to do. We might not always like the way the government handles it. They may not do what they need to do with it, but we at least need to have integrity to do the right thing. Same with registration. Some businesses, some countries, everybody's registered. I remember being in Ethiopia, and I think they said, you know, it's not an option. Everybody is registered. You're not allowed to make a sale without a receipt. That's part of how the government has set it up. In other countries, very few businesses that go through our training are registered. And so we need to think about, what does it mean to do business and not be registered? What reflection does that have? What is the actual procedure? In some places, it can be a long procedure and expensive because you don't know the right people. They did a study, I think in Brazil, that if they employed 2 lawyers and 2 interns, no, 1 lawyer, I think, and 2 interns, to register a business without using any connections. And it took them almost a year of 3 people working full-time, a ridiculous amount of time, a ridiculous amount of money that would need to be paid for bribes, versus somebody who knew the right connections. They could get their business registered in a day. So what are the challenges that people are facing, and how can you work alongside with the Ministry of Commerce or whichever government agency to say, we have people who want to be registered, they want to understand what their taxes are, to do the right thing, but we need the correct information to make that happen. We don't want to make a decision out of fear of the unknown, the fear that if we track our resources, right? If we track our income, that therefore we'll have to pay some huge amount. Sometimes people make those decisions without the real data. And so the goal of getting a speaker in is to get that real information so that people have a good understanding. And also it presents a face to them that can be helpful as they work to figure out the system that they need to navigate in. So the second objective would be why registration and paying taxes are important from a biblical perspective, a national perspective, as well as a personal perspective. You want to do the right thing. Our conscience, as we said, is something that needs to be educated. Our conscience can become seared when we justify our behavior. And we want to say, from a personal perspective and a national perspective and a biblical perspective, paying our taxes is something that we need to do. And we can put all the blame and point fingers at the government, but they are responsible for what they do, and we are also responsible for what we do. Another objective is understanding the role of access to capital and how to discern what is right for each business. If you are an organization that's connected to a microfinance bank, and if people are coming to the training because they think they will be getting a loan, it will impact the way they take the training. There is a lot of people who are moving from debt to debt to debt. And that's why the budgeting class and personal budgeting is so important, doing that in the business as well. But to move from loan to loan, it's not always healthy. Now, we would also say that many businesses need, in fact, they say, I think the average business needs about 4 loans in order to help it grow to a level where it can really be competitive. But how we use those loans, and if we take a loan when we haven't separated ourselves from the business, is going to be detrimental for the business as well as for the person. I remember the woman, she took a loan when I was working for a different organization in West Africa, and she was pregnant. We had that discussion about that, taking the loan when she's pregnant, how is that going to impact the business? We gave her the loan anyways, and her mother died, and about 4 months later, her father died, and then she also had the baby. So everything went for the funerals and not for the business. And so if we have not separated ourselves from the business, giving a loan is not going to be something that is going to be actually helpful for the person. So those are some of the objectives that we have in this particular session. We want to be looking at the walls of the business now, doing the finishing touches, maybe putting the pictures up, whatever we need to do to beautify. We talk about why it's important to register the business as a tax-paying payer. We have some voice with the government. Compliance is important. Respect in the community can be, some people will hold that with respect. But also participation in some conferences, business being at the table. If you're part of an association, you have that representation. If you're part of an association, you probably need to be registered. and so on. So it gives you a voice. It gives you also the opportunity to have a greater ear to what is happening. Taxation, of course, is important. As I mentioned earlier, we talk about Matthew 22, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. We emphasize tithing often in our churches, and it's also important for us to hold each other accountable to do what is right as a citizen of a nation. Then we look at sources of funding, and for me, this is a big issue. As I said before, it hurts me to think of how many people are in debt and how many people are feeling that bondage of being in debt. So we need to look through different sources of funding that we can have. Personal savings, friends and relatives are often called upon. Those are good things. Once those get exhausted, we might look at bank loans. A lot of the businesses that are in your classes will not have access to bank loans because they don't have land or a land deed or a vehicle, something that they can use as collateral. So then we go to the microfinance organizations, or depending on where you are, you might have a savings and loan association called a SACO or a SUSU or something like that, a VSLA. And those are good options. Oftentimes, if it's a microfinance institution, your interest rate is going to be higher than the bank loans. And the reason is because it's a riskier clientele. Microfinance is for usually micro businesses. Those are usually more risky than those larger businesses who have a lot more capital and have been around for longer, where you can feel more confident that you will be repaid. Microfinance is going to take more risks with smaller and businesses that have been around for a shorter period of time. And so that's why the interest rate is higher. So if you can join a savings and loan association where some of that savings will come back to you in the form of dividends, like a VSLA, those are good options. But again, there's some risk of management and oversight. You need to know the institution that's running some of those to make sure that your funds will stay safe. Too many people turn to loan sharks, and those are those who are lending at 5, 6, even 10% per month. And that is if we are taking loans for consumption, meaning that we are taking personal loans to just cover our bills, and we're not using it to invest to grow, you're going to end up in worse shape than before. And so finding those other alternatives is important. Understanding all the details, the terms of agreement for the source of funding is critical. There are government programs. Sometimes have specific agendas for we're letting money be available, and those can also be good as well. So different sources of funding, and it's a good time in your class to have a discussion about what types of options they have. Investment is also something that people might look at, and finding investors, people who are willing to own a certain percentage of the business. In return, they get a certain percentage back. Again, it's risky. People are going to look at the return of investment, and they want to make sure that they are going to get a good return. So
Raise him, Daddy.
How are you doing?
It's not as easy to get investors for sure. And again, that's why when we look at the Doing Business booklet that the World Bank puts out, you can see how secure are investors in investing in your country. And you'll see a number that's put there for the security of that, for how easy it will be to get investors. Making sure that people understand a loan. Most people do. Borrowed money, it should be used to help a business meet its goals, not used just to cover certain consumables. There are good things about loans. Loans are not all bad. And it can help the business to purchase a larger inventory, to hire employees in terms of expanding production. So again, it's not something that's consumable because you're going to be expanding your production. Getting equipment, of course, is a good thing. But it can be tempting for the owner to maybe live off the loan, can use the loan for non-essential items, and spend the loan on family needs. And of course, that's the consumption portion of that. The owner might not be ready to manage the increase in money. So for a long time, I worked with an organization that was heavily involved in giving of loans. And we would see somebody come in who has a business valued at, maybe $5,000 US, and they're asking for a loan of $15,000 US. And they're asking for something that's 3 times the value of what they already have. And the danger with that is that that's too much growth too quickly. Most banks will not consider giving a loan that is worth more than 30% of the value of the business. So when you do your balance sheet and you look at the net worth of your business and you see it's worth $5,000, 30% of that is about $1,800 US. So you will not get a loan greater than that. And the reason for that is, some very well-founded research that says people that grow too fast, they haven't grown in management along with that. And so that's why wisdom says that you grow along with your business. You will grow slowly in order for there to be real depth that will allow it to be sustained over time. So a loan might also prolong the life of a struggling business when the better option is to shut it down. And sometimes businesses do need to just be shut down. Getting a loan might prolong that, but it also might give more challenges. And so sometimes we need to do those honest assessments and have others come in and also give those assessments. There are different terms that we want to make sure people understand when they're considering sources of funding. And again, this is good that you get a microfinance person in or a banker to come in and to lead this portion of the class. What does it mean for collateral? What type of collateral are they looking for? How does the collateral work? What does the contract mean if we set up the contract? What are the terms of the contract? What should we be asking for in terms of when the first payment is due? Sometimes you sign a contract and you realize you have to make your first payment after 30 days. Well, the loan has hardly started working within that time. So how do you negotiate those things? What happens if you bring a cosigner in, and what is the cosigner actually committing to? And you need to be careful who you ask to be a cosigner because they may end up being responsible for your loan. The interest, what is the cost, as well as the other terms. What are the small fees? Some people advertise a low interest rate, but they make up for it by charging a lot in fees when you make the agreement, and then they take that right off the principal of the loan. So you're getting less to start with. You're paying those fees up front. You get less, and then you have a challenge to try to pay it all back because you had less. The principal is the amount that was borrowed. What is the penalty? What if you don't make your payment on time? What is the penalty, and how much of that? Those are all things that we need to take the time to make sure people are seeing and looking at so that they have an understanding and are making good decisions for themselves. 5 C's of credit. Capacity. This is what the bank is going to do, or the microfinance institution is going to do. They're going to look at the capacity you have to repay. They're going to be asking for income statements and balance sheets. They want to see a history. If you have no history, that may be a problem. They want to look at the capital. What capital have you invested in your business? If this business goes bad, how much will you lose? You need to be losing more than the bank will be losing. This is your business, so we'll look at that. Collateral, what will you forfeit what is the conditions for that? We talked about that before. Again, the conditions of the loan itself, how will it be repaid? And then they will also look at character. How are you perceived by the lender? They will evaluate your honesty, your integrity, your dependability, and your background. So they may look for some terms of reference. A lot more countries now are also having credit going online, meaning people can do a background check as it relates to your credit. A lot of places will give you a score. In the U.S., we have 3 different main agencies that look at that, and we're given a score. And so The lower your score, the worse credit you have and the higher interest rate you will pay. The higher your score, the more credible you are, and that speaks about your character. And so your interest rate will be lower and people will be seeking you out because they know that if they give you the loan that you will be repaying that. So I know that there are a number of countries that are having more of that, and I think that's important. If you are involved in giving loans, if you are working with a microfinance organization, to participate in that is important, to make sure that people are not borrowing and not repaying from microfinance bank to microfinance bank to microfinance bank, but helping to hold them accountable across the board for some of those decisions is going to be important. All right, remember loans come in different shapes and sizes. Do your due diligence. Get at least 3 different quotes of what will be the best value. Do not take the first one offered to you. They are not free money, they are borrowed. They must always be repaid. In fact, we talked about this, I think, in Integrity and Finance class. You don't pay tithe on a loan. A loan is not free money. It's not a gift. It's not a first fruit. It is a liability. And so when you pay your interest up front on some loans and then you pay a tithe up front, you're working with so much less to be able to then repay this loan as well. We tithe from our first fruits. We tithe from what we have earned, not money that came as a liability. And so these are things that we need to educate people on as well. And the obligation to repay that is critical for the character and for the sustainability of that business. We want to make sure that people are successful with a loan, that it doesn't become something that brings them down. When you borrow a loan, we need to remember this: funds do not belong to you or your family, should not be used for personal reasons. You really need to have that boundary very clear between yourself and your business before you take a loan. Interest is usually figured annually, but it's quoted for payment on a monthly basis. If you're getting an interest rate of 1% that's per month, that's great. It's 12% per year. If you're getting something from 3 to 5%, be very, very, very careful. You'll need to be investing it in something that gives you an aggressive return on your investment so that you can pay not only the principal, but also the interest back. Just like a business, most lending institutions are also in the business to make money in order to be self-sustainable while meeting the demands for loans in the community. They're not doing it to be mean. They don't charge interest to be mean. It costs money for them to lend money. It costs money for them to recover money. It's a legitimate business and it's something that we need. And so we need to go into these agreements with the seriousness as well about how to repay. According to the Bible, we must be faithful in repaying debt. So there's some homework that's assigned at the end of session 12, a financing plan worksheet. If the people in your class are looking to borrow money, they need to think through that process and put a financing plan. I've taught this class a number of times. At the end of the class, people said, you know what, I realize I don't need to borrow money. And that's great. It's good if you can reduce your costs or you figured out ways to increase your profit by increasing your sales. But loans are not a bad thing. We just have to be very careful that we're using them wisely and prudently to grow God's business that you are in charge of managing. People are also to do, session 12 at the end, you do a review of the business plan. So they understand that now we're at the end of the sessions. Usually we give them a month to finish their business plan. If you give them longer than a month, people will often put it off until right before, or they won't do it at all. You give them less than that, they might not have enough time. And the idea for session 12 is you give them that month, and right after that is when you schedule the graduation as well as the commissioning service. And so they know that even though we're not going to meet together for the next month, that you as trainers are available to help them put their business plan together, to go through it, to give them feedback, to give them input, just kind of like a teacher, to go through their goals and help them think through, to go deeper into their objectives and their strategies as well. And then at the end of session 12, you also want to give them their post-training assessment. If you remember when we started, we showed in the manual that there is the trainer's manual, there is a pre-training assessment. You want to have them take the post-training assessment at this time to say, what have they learned? How have they grown in different ways? And don't be surprised if sometimes at the beginning they said, I know everything about marketing and I know everything about cost analysis. And so they gave themselves a high score. They get to the end of the SME training and now they realize there's a lot that they aren't doing because they went through the marketing classes or the pricing and cost analysis. And so they give themselves a lower score. So don't be surprised if the score decreases. It doesn't mean that you didn't teach. It may mean that because you taught it effectively that they recognize there's more to learn and do as well. So that brings us to the end of session 12. And I see that we have about 10 minutes left here. So again, you can see session 12 can go quicker. It doesn't go quicker though when you bring in speakers, and that's really one of the recommendations that we have. What I'd like to do in the last 10 minutes is just talk about the exam tomorrow. What the exam will actually do is the way I've set it up is you can see it right now on Google Classroom that there is an exam there, but you can't click on it yet. I will make it live, I believe, at midnight my time. And then it will be live for 24 hours. So starting at midnight my time, you can figure out what time that will be for you. For most of you, for East Africa, it will be 7 a.m. For West Africa, it will be 5 or 6 a.m. or 4 or 5 a.m. Sorry. But you'll have all day to take that. And it's not going to be a terribly long exam. My encouragement for you is to look through your quizzes again, to look at the quizzes and just, again, we're looking not to trick you in any way, but just to have an assessment of where do you have some comfort level, where do you have different capacities to do teaching in different areas. And the leaders of your country, of the DML team in your country will be able to also see how you did in order to say, okay, this person looks like they really get bookkeeping and maybe they'd be willing to do the training in this area or marketing or the foundation of the business and so on. And so that's the goal. The goal is not, you know, it's not about the grade that you get. It's really to see how well are you getting this and where do we as team leaders need to maybe have a little bit more time and a little bit more concentration. So look at the quizzes, review those, and then also there will be the part that you do online, like the quiz, and then there will also be an Excel document where I'm giving you some activity to do relating to the accounting equation, assets equals liability plus owner's equity. For those of you who hate math right now, you're groaning. But again, we know that not everybody is gifted at teaching the bookkeeping part, but we do need to assess who is. And so we'd like to see you try to do that. So you might want to look at that again tonight, how to create an income statement and a balance sheet from those things to help us know who can really help build capacity in those areas. Excuse me. So just to reiterate, some people may never teach that part, and that's okay. We need trainers who are good at the foundation, the business's mission, the ethics, the worldview, the goal setting. We need some who are good at marketing, and we need some who are good at management. But those are more, we can measure some of those things, but the bookkeeping one, again, is something that we need to measure in a different way. So that's what we are looking for you to do with that exam. Tomorrow we will meet for only 1.5 hours instead of 3 hours. I don't think the exam will take longer than 1.5 hours. So I would recommend that you come to the course, to the class. We will talk for the first 1.5 hours about the key themes about being the trainer for DML, about some things that we expect from trainers in terms of training with excellence. And then we will sign off from Zoom, and I think you should be able to complete it in the 1.5 hours that you have remaining. and then you will be done with all of that, and then there will be some ongoing support and follow through from the leaders. Josh, Victor, I want to open it up for you you wrote a question, but maybe you can talk through that question, and we'll see if we can have an answer for you. Would you like to, and then also anybody that has questions about the exams or the quizzes, but let me turn it over to Josh Victor for a minute.
All right, my question was, as trainers, we may encounter a problem where there is among the trainees someone who may be wanting to start their own business, but is still working as an employee in some jobs. So we have talked about being loyal and maintaining the integrity, and yet you feel very much you want to go and start your own thing. So my question is, how do you help such a person? And I'm also asking that in case it is not the employee that you want to help, but it is an employer who is facing that same challenge, how would you help such people?
All right. Let me throw that open to anyone who might want to respond to that. So the question is, we talked about integrity and we talked about loyalty. You have somebody who wants to leave, or perhaps you even want to leave. How do you deal with that? Anybody want to have a response?
Yes, I would like to say that as a responsible employee, knowing that this business needed your presence, when you want to leave, you should give time to the employer to bring in another person. You should be able to inform them in time when you want to leave, and so that it gives them the opportunity to find someone to replace you, so that your living is in a harmonious way, because you might need that relationship in another time with the person who has employed you. Or it could be that another relationship of partnership develops because of how you left in a harmonious way. Most times people just think about leaving today and tomorrow they leave. And so you are letting down the business, even if you had good intentions to leave, but you didn't give your employer enough time to prepare.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Pastor, go ahead.
Did you say Pastor Alex?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. I'm thinking that helping employees to have job security is a very valuable thing. And help them to come to a place where they realize that the business does not possess them. They are partners in the business. And should there be an opening, that you as the owner of the business would wish them well. And I think I would like to underscore the fact that challenging them to come to a place where they will value the relationship that you share with them beyond working with you is going to be valuable, so that when they're leaving, they need to give you time to be able to look for another person to be able to step in their shoes. One thing that I really value is that whether you walk away without consideration of my investment in you or not, the most important part for me is that I have been able to develop you. I have been able to make input in your life. I have been able to grow somebody. And I know that they will be able to be a blessing to somebody else, even if they are not directly a blessing to my business or to me as a person. And so I love to create an atmosphere, an environment around people where they know that they are there to flourish and they have their freedom with them, but they also have a responsibility of mutual respect in the relationship that we share.
Excellent. Thank you for that. One of the things has been drilled into me my whole life is to never burn bridges, right? To keep, you never know when you need to continue to work with somebody and partner with somebody. So leaving well, ending well, sending people off, all of those things are important. Elvis, I'm going to give you a chance, and then Bose after that. Go ahead, no concern.
Okay. In order not to repeat, I think that from the beginning, learning from the experiences of these things to avoid and create a platform for constructive dialogue. It's important that when capacity building trainings are taking place, sponsored by the company, contracts should be made with the employees as to how long they will have to give their services to the company after the training before they can leave if they want to. So, to that effect, when the person wants to leave, you have to come to a place of dialogue where he can negotiate. If he wants to leave before the time, then it will be something that he will not just walk away. They will be able to sit down and talk over it and then come to an agreement.
Yeah.
So I think that is going to make it.
Good. That's important. Thank you for that. Bose, go ahead. And then Kamwada, that's the last one. Chris Bose.
Yeah, I wanted to say that for employers, employers should have a large heart and realize that no matter what you do, you will always have people who will want to leave and who may not live in a good way that you are happy with. But if we have a large heart that we are ready to accommodate, we know that in the midst of the people, you will get the good, you get the bad. Like some people usually say that man is man, even at his best. So if we have that at the back of our mind, we'll be more liberal to give and to give willingly, regardless of what the people do. And a large heart will not allow you to be so hot that you will not want to also give to another person again. And then like what the other person has said is, for as employer, we need, when we want to train people, we should give them or let them know that they training them, we should sign an MOU with them to let them know that after training, we will be willing that you serve us for so number of years for training. And then that will help them to know that we are going for this training, then we have an obligation towards the organizations that is training us. I think that will also be of help.
Yeah, like the contract as well. All right, last comment is Kamwada.
Okay, thank you. For me, I may say that as an employer, we have to have that big heart. If your employee has discovered maybe an opportunity to also start a business, then it is your job as the employer to bless that employee of yours, because you've helped him or her to earn the skills. So you bless that person, because it is through that person, it is through you that that employee of yours has gained the skills and realized that he also has the ability to start up something. So as you, the employee, you have to give time. You inform your employer that maybe I want to start something, to start this business, but then I'm hoping to start it at this time, so that you give the time for the employer to get in someone to replace you. That's what I think.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Lots of good thoughts, lots of challenging thoughts about how to handle situations that are difficult and tough in terms of loyalty and integrity and so on, but appreciate all the comments and the feedback. Joy, are you there from Hut Seat? I'm wondering if you would be willing to close us in prayer for today, and then we will come back again tomorrow for our final time together. Yes, there you are. You can unmute.
Father, we just want to thank you for this fellowship. We want to thank you especially for our facilitators. We thank you for the strength. We thank you for using them. We also lift up our participants to your throne of grace, that what we have received here will not only be hearers of what we've heard. We'll go back and implement them. That, Lord, you arrest us, that we will take a commitment that each within our families, within our friendship circles, that there will be a transformation, that our nations will know that we went through a time like this. Father, we also want to thank you for this moment of peace, because it was a time for us to sit down and listen. Father, that we want to see it positive in our lives and the lives of our community. Father, we commit tomorrow into your hands. We commit especially connections, that the connections will go through so that every participant should make it to the end. We also want to commit the time of exams, that each country will go back with a team fit to meet the needs of each community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Holiday has come.
Amen.
Last day in school. Last day in school. Wow.
Joyful noise right now.
Congratulations.
Bye.
Good to see you, Auntie Yvonne. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Are you afraid?
Yes, hello.
Your Grace, we
Bye.
miss you. Auntie Grace. Auntie Grace, we miss you today.
Yeah. My connection was very bad. I couldn't go through.
But now we are speaking. Let us continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone will let you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Renita. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Members, the exam don't for celebrate. Hey. I need